The only thing that I've seen happen to publishers in the last 15 years is revenue decline and margin compression.
Yeah.
Nothing good has come from all of these promises that they've been sold. If they're increasing their revenue and profits so that they can please their VCs,
Mm-hmm.
that money has to come from somewhere, and it actually is extracted between the advertiser and the publisher, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you insert a middleman, if the middleman is growing their revenue and profits, where the heck is that coming from? It's
Yeah.
coming from a toll being taken between the advertiser and the publisher. As all of these ad tech companies are showing hockey stick revenue growth, where is
Yeah.
that coming from? It's all coming out of the pocket of the publishers. So
Yeah.
therefore, yes, to make digital good again, we need to dispense with all that and have the advertisers realize that the only ads that matter are the ones shown to.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. And today I get to hang out with a force of nature, Augustine Fu, a founder of Fu Analytics, the founder of Fu Analytics, and an independent fraud fighter for many years. Augustine, welcome to the show.
Hey, Johnny, glad to be here with you.
I love your how'd you get the moniker Dr. Fu? That's what you call
You
yourself on
know,
social media.
it's because I do have a PhD from MIT, and I
Yeah.
thought I better get as much mileage out of the doctor as I possibly can to make my parents proud of me. Because like I'm not doing anything related to what my PhD was. So, my mom is very disappointed. So I said, okay, I'll just keep using the word doctor, so she won't
Yeah.
be as disappointed in me.
And now you are a doctor everywhere. If you just look me up on LinkedIn, I'm Dr.
Yeah.
Fu. I love it, man. So, can you tell us about Fu Analytics? Just a little bit about that, and then we'll get into your origin story.
Sure, sure. Fu Analytics is the analytics platform for digital ads. So it's just like you have Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics for websites, but you can't use GA for the ads themselves. Fu Analytics has both in-ad tags that ride with the ads and see where they go, and whether bots loaded them or whatever. And we also have an on-site tag that goes on websites, typically publisher sites. So it's a platform that advertisers subscribe to, publishers subscribe to. Again, it's kind of like Google Analytics Enterprise, but it has more data around bots versus humans versus search crawlers and things like that. And these are typically details that GA doesn't show you. So it gives you supplemental data. Sometimes you need that to help troubleshoot some data discrepancies that you might see in GA. So that's
Love
kind of
it.
the
Yeah.
short answer of what Fu Analytics is.
Yeah, and so to some degree, just to frame it for people, that we're probably gonna get into some technical stuff in this conversation, but on a high level, you're trying to help people see the truth of what's happening with
Yeah,
advertising.
and say bot traffic, right? So there are some even legitimate publisher sites that have unwanted bot traffic, right? We've all heard about the AI crawlers. Sometimes they come in such large quantities in such a short amount of time that it's almost like a DDoS attack, right? They just overwhelm the site with traffic. So in those cases, it's not necessarily fraud bots or anything. It's just that those crawlers are coming to scrape the content so that they can use to train the AI. So we have to differentiate that from real humans coming to the site. And I was just telling someone yesterday, when I click through on ChatGPT, right, I'm doing a query and then it gives me a source link and I click through, it adds UTM source equals ChatGPT,
Yes, it
but that's
does.
actually me, the human, that's on that page, right? So
That's
in that
right.
case, even though I came from ChatGPT, it's actually me, the human. And that's entirely different than the scourge of AI crawlers, overwhelming a lot of publisher sites recently.
So you just said a word fraud bot. So there will be some times when I'm going to just clarify vocabulary.
Sure.
What's a
Yeah.
fraud bot for the layman?
So for fraud bots, it's, think about those websites that humans don't even know about, right? So there's a huge number, like tens of millions of these long tail sites that have some kind of content on them. Humans have never heard about them, but they need page views in order to generate ad impressions to sell. So in those cases, they just go out and buy the traffic. And
Yeah.
common sense will tell you there's not a whole bunch of humans sitting around with nothing to do but to go to your website tens of millions of times. So all of that is generated by bots because it's easy to do, right? It's just software programs or what we call headless browsers that just repeatedly load the pages. And you can generate enormous quantities of page views and therefore enormous quantities of ads to sell. But again, those are fraud bots because those are not humans seeing the ads. And so
Yes.
the advertisers are not getting what they thought they were paying for.
Who benefits from fraud bots?
Those fake site owners, right? So I have to be very clear here that I'm going to bifurcate it. It's a one or zero. There are sites that are created solely for creating ad fraud, right? And they have no human traffic, so they have to buy all their traffic. Those are the fraudsters. And then you have legitimate publishers, right? The ones you deal with, I deal with, and ones you can literally sit across the table from because they actually have humans, right? And they have editors, they have journalists that actually write the content. So they might have a bot problem, but they're not deliberately buying all their traffic, right? So that's how I
Yes.
differentiate good publishers, real publishers, from everyone else who's trying to just make a quick buck by using fraud bots and whatever.
Yes. And so if I'm one of these fraudulent site owners, why do I buy traffic? What's my purpose in buying traffic for a
Because you
site
just
that?
don't have any traffic because nobody knows about your site anyway, right? The simple
Yeah.
answer,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you would have to go and buy the traffic, and there's many
Yeah.
means of generating
Right.
those page views, which
Yep.
then
Yep.
generate the ad impressions. So,
Got it.
these days
Got
it's
it.
not only about sites. If
Yep.
you're a fake mobile app, like a flashlight app or alarm clock app, if you wanted to commit fraud, all you'd have to do is load those ad impressions in the background
Yeah.
continuously,
Yeah.
even if the app is not in use, even if the mobile device is not in use, right? It's sitting on the nightstand all night long, but it's never turned off and it's always got an internet connection. So
Yeah.
conveniently, those bad mobile apps, those fraudulent mobile apps, can easily commit a ton of ad fraud just loading ad impressions in the background. And those don't require bots because it's literally
Yeah.
the app itself doing that, right? It's
My
not a
goodness.
fake visitor going to a web page to cause
Yeah.
the ads to load.
Man, all right. I think we're starting to get into the problem here because even as you're telling me, I'm feeling overwhelmed just listening to you talk about this. This is just happening all the time to normal, ordinary people, um, and being taken advantage of to some degree
Yeah,
by
one of
apps.
the most important things I have to convey here, because you serve a lot of media owners, right? The people who are the legitimate publishers selling the ads. Sometimes they get accused of high bot traffic, and they are asked for refunds, clawbacks, make goods, and that kind of stuff. And then the publisher is scratching their head, like, we don't have a lot of bots on our site. What the heck is going on, right? They're getting accused. So one thing I need to articulate to the media owners is that all of that fraud didn't actually occur on your site.
Yeah,
It actually occurred elsewhere. The problem is in the reporting. So whether it's the placement reports or whether it's the fraud verification companies, they take the domain that was passed in the bid request and they assume that that's where the ad went, even if it
yeah,
didn't. So let
yeah,
me kind of explain why that happens. If you're the owner of fakesite123.com, you would never put your own domain in the bid request because you're not going to get any bids. You're always going to lie and pretend to be some well-known domain like ESPN or BBC or Home and Garden or whatever. And by lying, right, you put Food Network, Home and Garden in the bid request, but you put your own seller ID in there because you want to get paid.
yeah,
So that discrepancy, you know, if someone just looked, they could solve that problem. It's called domain spoofing, right? Where a fake domain is pretending to be a real domain. But the problem is when the bad guy puts bbc.co.uk in the bid request, the verification vendors, the legacy verification vendors, thinks that that's where the ad went. And when all of it's being loaded by bots, obvious bots, they'll say, "Oh, it's all this bots on BBC." So then they call up the legitimate publisher and say, "Oh, you have 90% bot traffic. We need a refund." And
yeah.
then, the publisher's like scratching their head, "What the heck is going on? We don't have 90% bots on our traffic, on our site."
Right.
So that is the problem that many publishers don't understand. It's that the bots are not on their site, it's somewhere else. It's just a figment of the reporting. But that case has come up over and over again, and publishers have asked for my help to come in and try to troubleshoot that, to say, we're getting asked for 90% make good. We don't think there's that many bots on our site. Can we put Foo Analytics on the site and show them the data that we don't have that level of bots? Right. Sometimes I'm
Yep.
already on the site, so I can show, like, it's mostly blue. There's only like 5% red. So it's the vendor, the verification vendor, that's got incorrect reporting, right? So then that's how we fight off the refund request.
All right. So I compare you every time I hear you talk. It just makes me think of like Batman and like detectives, right? You remember Batman, the early Batman, he was a detective, right? Like he's trying to solve crime, solve problems. You really are a mystery solver. I think that's when I hear you talk, you help people solve the mystery and look deeper to
Yeah,
understand what's really happening instead of what appears to be happening.
yeah, because sometimes the reports that you get from the platforms just contain errors, right? I don't think it's malicious all the time, right? There are some cases that is malicious, but basically there's errors. And this exact thing, the domain spoofing. So when the fake site pretends to be bbc.co.uk, in the placement reports, that's what gets recorded. So then the fake BBC stuff gets commingled with the real
Yep.
BBC stuff. And so
Yep.
you can't tell the difference afterwards, right? So that's an error that's actually recorded faithfully in the log level data, right? In the placement reports. So yes, I'm a problem solver, and I try to use the data that we can collect. For example, through Food Analytics, there's other ways you can collect the data, but I use that data to help me understand what's going on, and then I can try to explain, what actually happened, right? So we can troubleshoot and fix stuff.
I love it. I love it. So now let's go. So you've got a peculiar set of skills, right? Like, that's from Taken.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got a,
yeah. I
says
got you.
I have a peculiar set of skills. So tell us a little bit about the origin of how you came across this problem, how you decided to solve this problem, how you developed into a person who could solve this problem.
Yeah. Well, my background's in science, so I have a PhD from MIT in chemical engineering. So nothing to do with what I do today, but it's really, think of it as a scientific method. It's like test, hypothesis, and test again, and see if it kind of corroborates or refutes your hypothesis. So here it's like digital marketing happens to be at this perfect intersection between marketing, which is more art, and science, which is like the data that we can actually collect. So unlike any other channel before it, right? TV, you only had limited data, but in digital, you had almost complete data. So I kind of fell into it, and specifically this fraud problem, I definitely fell into it, right? It wasn't something I woke up and said, I gotta go do this today. But when I was at Omnicom, we were serving a lot of pharma clients, and we were seeing enormous click-through rates, right? So the averages would be like 10%, 15%, 20% average. So we're saying, oh, wow, these look like they're performing really, really well.
Yeah.
And then we started digging in a little bit closer, and you see some sites have 100% click-through rates, right? These are the sites that send the search traffic, right? They run
Yeah.
search
Yeah.
ads, and those are paid on a cost per click basis. And like we were talking about the fraud bots before, some bots only need to cause the ads to load, and they get paid. That's a CPM basis. Some bots actually have to click on the ads before they get paid. That's a
Yeah.
CPC basis, right? Cost per
Yeah.
click. So
Yeah.
then we saw some of these fraudulent sites get greedy and have their bots click on every single ad that they saw. So
Yeah.
that way it's like, oh, 100% click-through rate. That's clearly not possible, right? Humans don't click on ads that much.
Yeah.
So when we started peeling back the onion, we were seeing really strange things. And at the time, almost 15 years ago, no one could explain why that was happening, right? They just thought the campaign was performing, really, really well. But, once I started peeling that back, I said, okay, well, there's a lot of these advertisers, not just the pharma clients that I was serving, that probably face the same thing, and they just don't know anything more about it because nobody has the tech to tell them what's going on. So that's when I started building a set of tools, which now grew into Foo Analytics, right? It wasn't that I
Yeah.
started out building Foo Analytics. It's not venture funded or anything. It was
Yeah.
just that I needed some better tools to collect the data that I could rely on and then provide audits and help the advertisers figure out what was going on, right? So I kind of just started building that with a developer. This was in like 2012, 2013 timeframe. And right around that time was when programmatic became mainstream, right? So a lot
Yep.
of big advertisers started buying more and more ads through the exchanges as opposed to from the publishers. And that's basically what opened this Pandora's box of fraud, right? It opened a huge loophole, and bad guys could literally create tens of thousands of fake WordPress sites and just add them into the exchange. And for the very first time, they could sell to the largest of advertisers, right? Before that, before those ad exchanges, imagine some no-name person with a company that's 5 days old. If they go to P&G and say, "Oh yeah, we have a whole bunch of ads to sell you," they'd be laughed out of the room, right?
Yeah.
So, they say, "Who the heck are you guys?"
Yeah.
But now by adding it into an exchange like AppNexus, they could now start taking money from the largest of advertisers, right? So that actually was the seminal event that allowed the fraud to proliferate. And so right around that time, our original tags were for sites because it was search clicks that came through to the pharma company's websites. we had to then add in ad tags, right? Which meant that we had to figure out, okay, where did the ads actually go? And
Yeah.
were they loaded by bots, right? So at
Yeah.
that time, we added in ad tags in addition to our on-site tags. And that's when we started measuring ad impressions. And if you think back to that time, it wasn't even our data, right? AppNexus themselves admitted because they wanted the publicity. So there's an Ad Exchanger article that said they reduced the number of ad impressions from 280 billion per month to 20 billion. That's a 92% decrease. Basically, they admitted that, oh, all this was fake anyway. So they had to do that,
Wow.
otherwise people would stop buying from them. But my question back to Brian was like, okay, well, what about all those people who bought from you before the cleanup? Did any of them get
Yeah.
refunds?
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't, right? So that's kind
Yeah.
of fraud has been a 90+% problem since 2016, 10 years ago, right? And a lot of people think it's not that big because they've been looking at the press releases from legacy fraud vendors that said it's 1%, don't worry about it,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of just education that still needs to happen. And it's finally happening now,
Yeah.
after so many years. And people are really interested. Okay, we have to be more careful with our spending. So therefore, they're asking more questions that they didn't ask in years past. Right. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that's kind of the origin story. I didn't set out to build Foo Analytics, but it's kind of evolved into this platform. And like I mentioned in the early days, I was just doing consulting. So I would just screenshot from it, put it in a PowerPoint, and then deliver. But I can't scale that, right? It's just one of me. So I couldn't do more projects. In 2020, I just decided to open up the platform to others. So I just gave it a name, Foo Analytics, and created user accounts. And then my job became training others to use it so that they can actually have the analytics to measure their own ads and make them better, right? Do the optimizations themselves.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. All right. That's a classic superhero origin story. I look back at it, you just had this moment. There's this problem that comes up. Nobody's willing to kind of just let it go. I guess that's just the way these things go. You have this kind of, I don't know. There's a justice thing with you. I think you desire justice. You
And there's
desire
some
truth.
gut feeling, right? It's like, okay, this
Yep.
doesn't make any sense, right? So
Yep.
make it make sense. And it
Yep.
didn't. So it's like, okay, it's all bots clicking on it. That's why.
Yeah.
And when we start seeing clicks after the campaign was over. So like humans can't do that, right? They're not even any ads running anymore. But since
Yeah.
the bots got the click through URL, they would just keep playing because they didn't know the ad campaign was over.
Yeah.
So, like all of that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, it's got to make sense. And so
Yeah.
I kind of tell people, the fraud detection stuff should not be rocket science. I even have an article out called Common Sense Bot Detection. It's like, okay, just look at the data. You should be able to understand why we label it as a bot. And if I can't explain that to you in a way that you understand, then I'm not doing my job, right? So
Exactly right.
yeah, it's like it's
Yep.
all data driven. It's like, can I show the clients the data and explain it to them?
Now, you said that more and more publishers are starting to reach out to you, and I'm assuming these are going to tend to be larger tier publishers.
Yeah,
Um, but that sometimes the middle and smaller tier publishers can learn from what's happening with the larger tier
yeah,
publishers.
it's
So
the same phenomenon that's impacting, right? It's the same negative phenomenon that's been impacting all publishers. But the big publishers get hit the most because it's always better for a bad guy to pretend to be a large site like yahoo.com or
yeah,
msn.com
yep,
because all those fake impressions get commingled in a much larger haystack, and people when they look at the placement report say, yeah, MSN's huge, so that explains why we have billions of impressions. They don't
yeah,
even bat an eye and think, okay, something could be wrong with that. But when we dig into the data, right? So
yeah,
bad guys pretend to be the major sites much more often than smaller sites. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
When we look into the data, just look at the bid request fire hose. You can see 45 times more fake Yahoo bid requests than real Yahoo bid requests, right? Just
wow,
looking at unpermissioned versus permissioned.
wow,
So there's just overwhelming amounts, 45 times, not just 10 times, not just 20 times, it's 45 times. And there's others that are even higher than that. But for the major sites, there's many times more faked bid requests pretending to be them than real. And
yeah,
that's because the bad guys have to pretend to be a well-known site in order to get bid requests,
yeah.
in order to get bids.
And then the way that this negatively impacts the publisher is
Is that the
by
money is diverted away, right?
Money's
So
diverted away.
when the advertiser thinks they're bidding on MSN, it's actually going to the bad guy. So like a chunk of that money, right, whether it's a quarter, a third, a half of that money is literally flowing away from the publisher. They never get to see it. So what we have observed in the last 15 years is that the mainstream publishers have lost top line revenue and they've seen margin compression, right? Bottom line profitability has also
Yeah.
been compressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then how do they, so it's one thing to know that it's happening, right? You can help them to know that it's happening. What happens to mitigate it or to stop it from
It's
happening?
also easy. It's a non-technical answer, but let me set it up by talking about the experiments that I did for publishers last year in 2024. So I'll use the BBC example just because it's easy to talk about. So I actually played the role of an advertiser. I set up a campaign in DB360 and I bought bbc.co.uk. So basically a single domain inclusion list because I wanted to see two things. What percentage of my ads actually got to the site and what percentage of the CPM that I paid actually got to the publisher. Okay. So I'll start with the second, which is easier. So I paid $1.50. Guess how much the publisher actually got of my $1.50?
Oh man, it's
It's
bad.
going to be bad.
Yeah, I don't know, half,
Keep trying.
quarter, a
Keep
quarter of it went
trying.
to the publisher. A tenth went to the
They got,
publisher.
yeah, they got 12 cents of my
Wow.
$1.50. So if you do the math,
Wow.
it's less than
Wow.
10%, right?
Yeah.
So it's because of all the middlemen, and I'll include disclosed middlemen or not disclosed middlemen that are in
Yeah.
that programmatic supply chain that's taking a portion of that $1.50 that I paid. So then the publisher gets only 12 cents of it. Okay. So the way to solve that would be to sell as much direct to advertisers as possible.
Okay.
The second part is how much of my ads actually got to that one domain. And I'll kind of simplify it here. When there are many, many supply sources, so I ran an experiment where all the supply paths were turned on because there's like, 50, 60 different supply SSPs, right? Supply side. When that happens and you don't turn those off, there's almost like an infinite combination of supply paths. And that just makes it a lot easier for bad guys to pretend to be your domain. So in the BBC specific case, after the campaign was over, we looked up, okay, how many supply sources purported that they sold BBC inventory. BBC told me they only sell through five. We saw nine. That means there were four entire SSPs in there that were selling bbc.co.uk when they were not even authorized to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So those are examples of where that's kind of the leaky bucket where the bad
Hmm.
guys can onboard fake inventory pretending to be BBC. Now,
Wow.
the non-technical solve to that would be just BBC went to those SSPs and said, we don't have a contract with you. You're not allowed to sell our stuff. So therefore, block the domain. So it basically, by blocking the bbc.co.uk domain in those SSPs, it just prevents the bad guys from onboarding inventory, onboarding bid requests that purport to be that domain. So
Got it.
it's a non-technical solve. You don't need to pay for any additional tech. You don't need the verification vendors to do. All of that is just they said, well, you guys are not authorized, so block that domain. You can't sell our stuff. So that just helped
Yep.
clean that up a little bit more, right?
Yep. Was that a high percentage of the fraud that got eliminated just by that step, or is there still
I don't have the
cleanup?
overall picture
Yep.
of because we only ran that experiment, so it was kind of like a self-contained thing. I
Yep.
don't have knowledge of the rest
Yep.
of their data, like what portion of their impressions, like what portion was actually siphoned away from them that they couldn't see. That was just it happened to many of the publishers, not just BBC. And so those are things that you can also, even without running the experiment where I'm buying the ads, you can just go into the bid request fire hose and just look at who's selling your domain, right? You know who's authorized, which SSPs are authorized to sell your inventory. And then if you see more than that or others that are not authorized, then you just go to them and say, you block our domain. Now, it's not as clean as that. I mean, in the case of, say, New England Journal of Medicine, it was very clean because they didn't sell anything through programmatic. So whenever we see nejm.org and there's like all these SSPs selling display ads, video ads, and whatever, it's like none of it's real because they don't sell any through programmatic. So then they just systematically went to every one of those SSPs and said, "You're not authorized to sell our domain. Block it."
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
That was much cleaner. It's more complicated now, but it's still going to help prevent a portion of those dollars from being siphoned away from you in a way that you can't see it.
Yes. All right. That makes sense. So what I wonder if here's what I wonder, because again, the people that are watching this are going to tend to be, there's some larger organizations, and they're going to be a lot mid-sized and smaller. They are familiar with programmatic. They are wrestling with whether programmatic is a mechanism that's helping or hurting. Some of them, right, are wrestling with that. Uh, and so, but my question, even as I'm listening to this, is, are does what you're saying mean that programmatic itself, the model itself, must die? You know what I mean? Like, is that the solution, or what do you see
I'm going to
in
put
the
it
future?
bluntly. The answer is yes. And that's because as an outside observer, because I'm not a publisher, I'm not a media seller, right? As an outside observer, the only thing that I've seen happen to publishers in the last 15 years is revenue decline and margin compression. Nothing good has come from all of these promises that they've been sold. So just it boils down to very common sense. If the ad tech company is venture funded, they sold you some tech. It doesn't even matter what tech it is. They sold you something. If they're increasing their revenue and profits so that they can please their VCs, that money has to come from somewhere. And it actually is extracted between the advertiser and the publisher, right?
Yeah.
The normal path is like the advertiser pays the publisher to show their ads. That's working
Yeah.
media. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
When you insert a middleman, if the middleman is growing their revenue and profits, where the heck is that coming from? It's
Yeah.
coming from a toll being taken between the advertiser and the publisher. So as all of these ad tech companies are showing hockey stick revenue growth, where is
Yeah.
that coming from? Okay, it's all coming out of the pocket of the publishers. So
Yeah.
therefore, yes, to make digital good again, we need to dispense with all that and have the advertisers realize that the only ads that matter are the ones shown to humans.
Yeah.
Because you can be buying tens of billions of impressions, 90% of which are shown to bots, you're not going to get any outcomes. And so I finally have started to see articles to say that some of these brands are saying, look, we've invested in programmatic for 10 years. Our sales have barely gone up 1% per year. And in
Yeah.
some cases, they've gone down. So
Yeah.
what the heck are we spending on? Despite all the attribution reports making it look like it's doing a lot of stuff, it's not. Our sales have actually gone down. That is the first time I'm seeing advertisers actually admit to that, right? Because the only thing that matters is whether it drove sales, right? Not what the reporting says, not what the reports that the platforms give you say. Okay, it's going to be, did it actually drive more sales for you? And the advertisers are realizing they're not getting that. So if the advertisers are not getting more sales and the publishers have lost money for the last
Yeah.
15 years, okay,
Yeah.
yes, we need to get rid of it. Now, I'm not saying that the tech is bad, right? There's some usefulness in the tech because the advertisers can't go to tens of thousands of sites, but they should also realize that there's not tens of thousands or tens of millions of sites that a lot of humans go to. It's a very finite set of good publisher sites that you should be buying from. And I just always go back to this very simple experiment I run in class, right? I taught a digital marketing class. I just asked the students, write down as many websites as you can in 1 minute that you visit every day.
Yeah.
They'll start rattling some off, and then they'll start slowing down when they get to six or seven or eight. They can't even get to 10 websites that they visit regularly every
Yeah.
day. So,
Yeah.
like, what the heck are these tens of millions of sites that are supposedly this long tail that has hundreds of billions of impressions to sell? Okay, that's not real,
Yeah.
even if the fraud detection companies can't detect the bots. Okay,
Yes.
so same thing happens with mobile apps. Try to name 10 mobile apps that you use every single day. Most people can't. They stop at around five or six, right? So between fake websites and fake mobile apps, those are that's the majority, that's where the majority of the dollars are going. So if you can cut that out and have more of the dollars from the advertiser go to the publisher, then the publishers can survive. Then they can pay their journalists. Then they can write more useful content, not the clickbait crap that we're seeing on all these MFA websites and whatever, right? So, we have to at some point say enough is enough and we have to go back to proper digital marketing.
Yeah. All right. I love how you put that. Now, I'm going to throw in an exception, a potential exception here. So if there were an organization um, that had it, you said that the technology or the concept isn't bad. The problem, and I think you really articulated it well. I got this picture of kind of like this swollen tick, like the middleman, right? Like
Yeah,
this
yeah,
swollen middleman
yeah,
that's like, and that has pressure to grow, right? And there's no, it's sucking blood from a host. There's no place else the blood's coming from.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so if it's going to get more, it's got to take more from the host, right? Um, now, um, if someone were to provide the tech um, and were a different kind of an organization, right? That did not, that, let's say, not venture capital and not all those things. I guess what I'm getting at is there a place for that as an enhancement protocol, right? Like a way to
yeah,
enhance traffic, um,
yeah.
and what would have to be true for it to not be another swollen middleman eventually?
Um, actually, that's a great setup. You don't know what I'm about to tell you next because we actually have that tech. And one of the key features of it is we don't have to charge for it because I'm
Okay.
not a middleman and I'm not venture funded and I don't have to make money on that.
Yeah.
So let me actually describe it to you. So basically, the key thing that we don't have to do anymore is to put every ad opportunity out to bid. That is
Yeah.
a ton of compute. That is a ton of bandwidth that's completely unnecessary. Just imagine if the advertiser said, I need to buy 10 million impressions and I'm willing to pay this CPM. If it just goes to the publisher, it's working media. They'll display 10 million impressions. That's it. You don't need to
Yeah.
bid it out, right?
Yeah.
The whole programmatic bidding process was kind of nice in theory, but everyone's been gaming that, right? So it's not actually market efficient anyway, right? So we're avoiding that entire bidding process. So we're saving a ton of time, we're saving a compute, we're saving bandwidth, and so the ad just runs. So we have something called a decisioning container where the publisher puts the code on the page. First thing it does is it filters out the obvious bots. So what we call
Yep.
GIVT, right? So if coming from a
Yep.
data center or it's a named bot, then don't call the ad. Simple as that, common sense. Then the second piece of it is it loads a static image as fast as possible because the other thing you might have heard me talk about render rates.
Yep.
In some of the data that I've looked at, 80 to 90% of the ads never get to the screen and render on the screen because the bidding process just took way the hell too long
Yeah.
and the person already left the page or scrolled past it, right? It
Wow.
just didn't show up in time. Okay,
Wow.
so they're trying their hardest, but if you imagine sending that bid request out to 10 different places and then that those 10 different places send it out to X number of advertisers, you see how that just
Yeah.
exponentially grows. And then, even though they have time constraints to get answers back, it still takes way too long. So a lot of the ads simply don't arrive in time to be rendered on screen. Okay, so then the ad gets rendered. And there's some other features which I won't get into right now, but basically there's a mechanism to allow the publisher to just sell those directly to advertisers. So in
Yeah.
that case, the advertiser can just come to the publisher and say, these are the domains I want to be on because we know there's a lot of humans on there. I want to buy 10 million impressions. I want to pay, $5 CPMs, $3 CPMs, whatever. And then all of that goes to the publisher because I don't need to
Yep.
take a cut.
Wow. I didn't know that. So I knew about Foo Analytics. I know you're a thinker and you're constantly trying to figure out how to.
Yeah, this new thing came about because for the last 6 months or so, I've just been constantly approached by publishers asking for help. So it's, like I said earlier in this podcast, I've been serving mostly advertisers, right? Because they put my tag in the ad to kind of see where the heck they went, and then they can block the bad sites and bad apps. But increasingly, the publishers have come to me because they're getting these refund requests or make goods, right? So they're having a problem with the IVT vendors. And so now it's like, okay, I think it's time to actually help these publishers with a new tech. So because we can detect the bots on the page, and these are bots that the publisher doesn't want, right? They're not buying
Right.
the traffic. It's just
Right.
bots that hit their page anyway. If we can filter those out, it provides an extra layer of protection, right? So simply don't make the ad call if we can clearly see that it's a obvious bot, what we call GIVT. Because now there have been
Yeah.
case examples of where the vendors, these verification vendors, didn't even catch the GIVT. Okay, so what the heck are they doing? They're getting paid, but they're not even catching the bots that say they're bots. Okay, that's how
Yeah.
bad the tech is. So in
Yeah.
this case, we're catching the bots, we're not making the ad call, and then if it's not a bot, then we call the ad as fast as possible, and we're kind of dispensing with the entire bidding process. So that way the ad is actually on the page soon enough so when the person scrolls by, they'll actually see it. Okay, so there's a lot of that kind of benefit rolled into it. So we call it the Foo Analytics decisioning container for publishers.
The Foo Analytics decisioning container for publishers.
Yeah.
And so if I'm a publisher, and I'm assuming you work with publishers of all shapes and sizes with
Yeah,
this, or
large and small. And I've been giving away the on-site tag for smaller publishers just so they can kind of see there. So yeah, they can contact me and then basically they just copy and paste some code into their ad slot and that's all they have to do. We'll do the rest for them.
that's cool. Now, I imagine there has to be somebody because just any technology or data, right? Like I work in the world of research and data. That's Data Joe, my company, and I know the importance of like there's data and then there's the story that it's telling you of what action you need to take, right? So you it sounds like you've got these ways to equip publishers to get the data and the understanding and the analytics. What kind of entity do they need in house to be able to then convert that to action for themselves?
The good thing is they don't need any technical people because again, I've dealt with enough publishers over the years. Sometimes they don't even have their own internal, engineering staff, right? Some of the bigger
Yep.
ones do,
Yep.
but they're so strapped for resources, and because of declining revenues, they've had to outsource a lot of things. They just can't even maintain FTEs. So in this case, it's just copy and paste some code into an ad slot. That's all they have to do. So it doesn't require an engineering lift at all.
But who will tell them the story? That's the question, right? Who, right? That will start bringing information in about what's happening on their site and potentially what's going wrong. How as a publisher do I know then strategically what do I now do with this information that I'm getting?
So I think you're kind of commingling two things. One is the
Okay.
Food Analytics on-site data, and then the second
Yep.
is this decisioning container.
Okay.
So publishers will put Food Analytics on their site to kind of look at bot versus not and
Got it.
troubleshoot
Got it.
those spikes in AI crawler traffic, right? So that's just like sticking the code on the site, just like they do Google Analytics. So then they log into the Food Analytics interface, they can see all the data. And so sometimes, I mean, when they see a big spike in traffic, they can say, oh, okay, well, we can look at Food Analytics and tell it's the perplexity crawler. Okay, so they can easily see
Ah, so
that.
they can know what's happening. Okay,
They
got
can,
it.
yeah,
Yep.
because GA doesn't sometimes doesn't disclose the name of the bot. And in fact, it has to filter out some of those bots. So then you're left with a data discrepancy you can't explain. But Foo Analytics records everything. We don't discard anything. So if you have something you can't explain in GA, you just log into Foo Analytics and you should be able to figure it out because we have all that
Got it.
supporting data, right?
Got it.
That's the analytics part. So in that case, you asked about the so what or the action. The publisher doesn't have to do anything because they're just public page and the crawlers are going to come and then they're going to go away. That's it. They don't actually have to do anything. There was a publisher in the UK where when they looked into Foo Analytics, they could see where the bot was coming from, meaning which data centers it was coming from. And they created a Cloudflare rule, which basically blocked that bot. So they literally saved a ton of traffic that they didn't want, right? It was just adding load to their servers. It was completely useless to them. So there are actions they can take once they
Mm-hmm.
know which bots it was
Mm-hmm.
and where it came from. Okay.
Got it.
The decision container is separate. That's more of a monetization thing. So when they get accused of high bots, right, like we said earlier, okay, the bots were not on their site, right? Our decision container will see that and we will filter out the GIVT, which could be the 1 to 5%. So it's a small incremental filtering that the legacy verification vendors are not actually even doing. So now when we filter that out, we know at least it's not GIVT, not the obvious bots. And if it's not the obvious bots, then we make the ad call, right? So we give them an additional layer of protection. And on top of that, where possible, if we don't have to send it out to bid, we'll just run the ad right as fast as possible. So I think I mentioned this before, but this was more of a direct selling mechanism, right? So the
Yeah.
advertiser can just come to the publisher and say, we know you have a lot of humans on your site because they might have seen the food analytics data or whatever. And they said, we want to buy ads on your site. We're willing to pay higher CPMs. And we know that majority of the ads are shown to humans because you even have this decisioning container that filters out even the last traces of those GIVT, the general IVT bots, right? So that way they have confidence that when they buy from these good publishers that their ads are being shown to humans. That said, it should start impacting their actual sales because if you're showing
Right.
ads to humans, you should be seeing a return in sales growth, which you
Right.
haven't seen for years and years because
Right.
you weren't even showing ads to humans in the first
Right.
place, right? You're
Right.
buying a ton of inventory, but who knows where the heck it went? Who knows where
Yeah.
the heck your money went and whether
Yep.
those ads were shown to humans or not. So I think that's kind of how we turn around digital advertising and make it better.
Yeah, I love it. And it sounds like like what I'm hearing is you're an advocate to both sides of the equation. So you're an advocate to the advertiser. You want the advertiser to get business results, which is why they are advertising in the first place.
Yeah,
And
and
you're an
show
ad,
them that a lot of the stuff they're buying in programmatic is not good. And then on the flip side, right, I'm trying to help the publisher show that they have large
yeah,
human audiences
right,
and
right,
therefore they deserve higher CPMs because, right, the advertisers are actually finally getting their ads in front of humans.
right, yeah. And you're getting um, the confusion out of in the middle, right? Just there's all this confusing stuff in the middle, bot traffic, all this other stuff that different things that are broken in the whole system, and trying to restore simplicity.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I tweeted out, a couple of days ago, the more they tell you they're transparent, the less transparent they actually are, right?
Yeah,
The more they tell you they're honest, trust me, I'm honest. Okay, the more you know, okay, they're trying to sell you something, right? So the reason there's that much confusion is because every middleman is selling their version of the story, right? They have to
yeah,
convince the publisher to put their code on the page and all that kind of stuff because they need to extract a toll. So they have to say, oh, it's going to make you more money. Okay, but if we just look back at the past 15 years, it hasn't made the publisher more money. All
right.
it's been done that we can actually see is that publishers have lost money to the point where, like the local news sites, Pointer had a study a few years ago saying that 1,500 local newspapers have died and gone away because they just couldn't survive on digital ad revenue. There just wasn't
Yeah,
enough of it, right?
yeah. And it's been that way since
For
jump.
years. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we're gonna look forward to the future a little bit, as we're kind of coming to the end of our time. What do you see? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to ultimately accomplish? And one way I frame this is, what would you like written on your headstone?
I hope I got more years to go, but
Yeah.
it would basically be, that I've helped kind of set the digital marketing ship right again.
Yeah.
Because, I've been in it since the beginning and kind of witnessed the entire arc of the evolution of it. And the ideas and theories are all good, right? Right ad to the right person at the right time, but it has to happen without middlemen, and it has to happen without what I'm going to call middle leeches, right? These
Yeah.
leeches, right? You'd use the word tick. I'm going to use the word leeches. Their job is to suck as much money out for themselves as possible, right? So this has to happen without those middle leeches, and we have to help the advertisers come more close to the publishers because we want more of those dollars to go towards working media, not into the
Yeah.
pockets of the middle leeches. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think in that case, we are literally going back to the way digital advertising was supposed to be, right? So ads shown on websites that humans visit, and therefore the ads are shown to humans, and therefore it's going to have some kind of actual business outcome for the advertiser, not some pretty looking report, not the 20% click-through rates that I saw, 15 years ago when I was at the agency. Right. A lot of those numbers are not going to look as pretty as they do now because they've been artificially inflated. Okay. It's going to go back to reality, but we're actually going to go back to real digital marketing. And that's my
Yeah.
hope for the industry.
Yeah. Um, why is this so important to you? Like, why do you care?
Because I grew up in this, right? I was not in digital marketing before. I kind of fell into it and saw, it was one of the industries that was going to be dramatically changed by the internet. And because of, where I sit, I'm at the intersection between data and art, right? Marketing science is the name of my company.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, I want to see digital marketing actually work and not have all this money go into the pockets of fraudsters. So it's like it's going to be a long journey because, and you know this, it's been a hard slog for many years because even the advertisers didn't want to hear it, right? Because they wanted to buy a lot of digital ads. They wanted it to be good. They didn't want to hear about the fraud. So nobody wanted to hear it. But I think everyone realizes that money's getting tighter, times are getting tougher, so they have to look more closely. So, like I said, once the pandemic hit, I opened up the platform, and that was kind of the external shock that caused everyone to say, okay, well, we better not just be spending so freely. We better take a closer look. Right before that, no one wanted to rock the boat. Right after the boat was rocked by this external force, they're saying, okay, we better be more careful. So only then did I start to see more advertisers say, okay, let's question this a little bit more, right? Don't just assume that it's working perfectly. Okay, so
Yeah.
I think we're seeing the beginnings of the turnaround, but we still have a lot of work to go to do. And hopefully, Food Analytics is an analytics tool set that will help both sides, right? The advertisers realize that we need to be buying from real publishers, right? Not just avoiding the fraud, but actively targeting the humans. Where do you find those humans? On real publisher sites.
I'm gonna use a controversial metaphor here slightly. I think, but I think everybody will get it. So what I see as I'm hearing your story is a person who saw something that other people didn't see. You saw, like, sometimes, right? Like, you get to the mountaintop and you see something, and what you saw was a really big problem that just didn't have to exist, right? You saw a big problem, and this big problem that you saw kind of corrupts the simplicity of what advertising relationships with publishing organizations is supposed to be, right?
Is supposed to be, yes.
It's supposed to be, we publish really good content and people come to us because we
Yeah.
publish really good content.
Yep.
And advertisers want to advertise and be seen around our content because they know it's good content and because we have a good audience. And then they win and we win because they fund
Yes.
our endeavor, right?
That's the original contract of the internet, right? Your users get free content in exchange for seeing ads. That's the way it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. But
Yeah.
once that contract was violated, because all these middlemen started inserting fake sites, bots, fake users, and all that kind of stuff, all of that got corrupted. So it's almost like the pendulum swinging back to the original intent, the original contract of the internet.
Yeah. So the metaphor I was going to use, and again, I'm going to use two things that are not alike. So there's a story about Abraham Lincoln, and that there's a time when Abraham Lincoln, was watching a slave auction, and he turned to the guy that was with him and he said, "I'm going to punch that in the face. I'm going to punch that institution in the face." Is what he said. He saw something, right? Now, is the internet fraud anything comparable to slavery? No, it is absolutely right. Like, slavery is a billion times worse than that. But what I see is that there's a moment where you saw this is wrong and it
Yeah,
could be
it's an
made right.
injustice. Yeah, it's an
Right.
injustice that has to be
Yep.
corrected.
Yeah.
And the
And
injustice is that the good publishers are just not getting what they deserve.
right. And you thought, and I'm going to do it. Right? That's the interesting part to me. You
And I
thought,
can do it, right? I had the
yeah.
technical skills, I had the good developer to help me with that. So, yeah, so I had a way forward. Again, it wasn't premeditated, right? I didn't set out to build Food Analytics to sell as a SaaS platform, whatever, but it kind of evolved. And part of the origin story I didn't really get into is that at the very beginning, I realized I didn't want to become a fraud detection tech company like the legacy ones that we know about. Because if I were them, I would rely on fraud to continue so I can keep making money off of it, right? I'm a digital marketer first and foremost, right? And so I want to actually solve fraud. At that time, for the lack of a better term, I just called myself an ad fraud researcher because I actually had data. I could say, okay, here's why it's fraud. It's clear that these are bots, right? So I can show the data. And then it became clear by 2020 that I couldn't help publishers, couldn't help advertisers enough by just doing it via consulting, put it in a PowerPoint and deliver the consulting. It didn't scale. So I opened up the platform and let others use it. And so now the big advertisers are coming in, they're even asking their agencies to use it so that they can actually see the
Yeah.
fraud that they couldn't see before, right? Because if you
Yep.
just relied on the legacy detection vendors, they've been telling everyone it's 1% fraud for the last 10 years. So if you heard that, you wouldn't know that there's a problem that needed to be solved. Once you put food analytics into your ads, you can see where it's going. You can see the crappy sites and the crappy mobile apps like the alarm clock app that we talked about that just kept loading the ad impressions. Okay, you don't want your ads going there. So once you can see the problem, right? Once you can see better, you can do better. So that's kind of how, this, and I don't blame the advertisers. It's literally they didn't have the right tools before. They couldn't see it. So that's why they did what they did. Now with better tools, better analytics, they can actually do better.
Do you think that you're going to see a significant change in your lifetime to this problem?
Yeah, I think so. It might take another 10 years, but yes, it's going to happen now, right? The pendulum has started to swing back the other way, right? So I will see an acceleration. I do think that large advertisers, they kind of look at what each other do, right? So if a couple more of these large advertisers come along, everyone's going to jump on board. And I do see the momentum growing because I'm helping with more and more audits now. So they're finally asking the question, can you just come in and help us audit some of our campaigns? Because we think there's something going on, but we still get reports from the platform saying it's 1% fraud, don't worry about it. And everyone kind of knows it's not 1% fraud.
Yeah,
So, they're finally coming around to asking for help. So that's a good thing.
yeah. Augustine, I love sitting with you, man. You're a no
Thanks,
nonsense
Johnny.
guy. It's not fluff. It's not deception. Like you're just a straight shooter. Thanks for sitting with me today.
Thank you, Johnny. Really good
Yeah.
session.
And everybody who has got to be here up to this point, thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something new, and then I hope you actually know that you now have another tool in your tool belt, like Augustine over here, Augustine Fu, Dr. Fu, as he's so aptly called, is here to help in a lot of these areas. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take it easy.